My mom grew up in a very broken environment, ended up being sexually abused, and that led her on a path of brokenness. The collapse of the Soviet Union really shook up my country pretty badly, and it's affected everyone, the rich, the poor, because the economy collapsed. And here's my mom working 2 jobs, trying to provide for the family, for her 3 little kids, and then her job is taken away from her. What I start noticing is that men would frequently visit our little home, and my mom would lock us kids in a living room. And for me as a kid, I was probably 7, 8, 9. I couldn't make sense of it. What ended up happening, our home turned into a brothel. And my mom literally at that point had no one to turn to for help, and it was between selling her children or giving her children away or selling her own body to provide for her kids. One of the problems my siblings and I faced on the street is fighting. Because we were pretty much outcast, the poor of the poor and the children of prostitutes would get stones thrown at us and names that went our way that were very abusive. Guys who were older than us would try to make advances at us or grab us inappropriately. My mom's drinking got progressively worse and worse, and though she really loved us, she would turn into someone I didn't know. She would turn her frustration, her anger, her pain onto us, and for little things we would be brutally punished, beaten. My mom would very often leave at night, so during the day we would have men in the house, and at night she would leave, and I would sit at our little balcony and cry and hope that my mom would come back. And one night there was a knock, very loud knock on the door, and I recognized the voice, and he was asking for my mom, and I said my mom wasn't home, he wasn't alone. So they started trying to break the door as we were crying. And living in that neighborhood, it's pretty much you can compare to a ghetto. We didn't have cell phones at that time, and even if we did, nobody would call the police. And even if they did, the police probably wouldn't show up, because our neighborhood wasn't a place that police would show up. As those men were banging on the doors, trying to break the doors, I remember getting on the knees and praying. And as we prayed, the silence was shocking, actually, because they were so close to breaking the door, and if they would break that door, I can only assume what would have happened to us. Because later on, I've also learned who that man was. He was part of the mafia. So home wasn't safe. Streets were not safe either. By the age I was 13, I already tried to commit suicide twice. Looking around, everything was so hopeless. Most people that I knew lived in such a brokenness. Home wasn't safe, streets were not safe, and I knew it was only a matter of time before I ended up in the same situation as my mom was. My third attempt would have been fatal. I planned it all out. I wrote my mom a letter, and as I was going from school home to commit suicide, a friend of mine invited me to church, and my first response was, oh, what is church? Because I was growing up in a Muslim country, in a very secular home. I had no concept of Christianity or church, but something within me just drew me into joining her. So I went to church, and I remember coming into the building, and it was just nothing that I would even consider a church, just a building, sat down, and as soon as people on the stage start singing, I broke down in tears. So I fell madly in love with God. I fell madly in love with Jesus. And that resulted me being in church as much as I could. And that didn't go well with my family, with my mom, and it's resulted me being kicked out of the house. I ended up living on the streets, and we had only one orphanage in the city that was run by a Christian family from Norway. I was 14 at that time, and 2 to 3 months in living in this beautiful, safe, stable, loving environment, we had a war broke out in Tajikistan, in my city. It was a brutal civil war, and all the foreigners had to flee the country for their own safety. So my adopted family had to protect their children. They had to leave the country. Shortly afterwards, the pastor of the church took me in. So the years of drinking caused my mom to get very sick. She got sick with liver cirrhosis and lived with that for a few years before passing away at the age of 43. In life, more often than not, most painful experiences of our lives become the areas of our greatest strength and areas where we can minister to people and love on people. And that's exactly what is happening in my life, something that I thought I would never do, something that I run away from because it was the source of my pain. Now, actually the area of my strength, the place where I can meet with people who've been through that and serve them and provide hope and show them that, hey, I also thought that there was no hope. There is actually so much hope. But it's funny that the bravest thing I think I've actually done is to start telling my story to the world, sharing with the world about the pain, sharing with the world where I came from. I choose to be brave not only for my own sake, but for people like my wee sister, for people like my brother, for my nephews. I choose to be brave for those who think no one is coming for them. I choose to step out of my comfort zone and take risks for my mom. Yeah.